Ever feel like your prayers are kind of just hitting the ceiling? Like, is anyone even there?
Yeah, it's a question that has echoed through centuries.
Totally. And today we're taking a deep dive into that very question. Does God really hear our prayers?
And we're going way back to grapple with it.
We are. We've got Jonathan Edwards back in 1735, right in the thick of America's Great Awakening.
Powerful preacher.
Powerful sermons. And then we're jumping ahead to 1967, tuning in to John Allen Chalk.
Known for his really insightful Bible teaching.
And to round things out, we're going to be pulling in some modern perspectives on prayer, too. So no matter where you land on this whole belief spectrum,
Whether you're rock solid or wrestling with doubts.
this deep dive is going to give you some serious food for thought.
And what's interesting is how across these different voices, different eras, you see this common thread, this affirmation of a God who actually hears.
Which, right off the bat, makes you think about all those lifeless idols.
Huge contrast.
Big time. But then the question becomes, well, okay, what does that even mean? God hears.
It's a big claim.
It is. Does it just mean, like, he's picking up the sound waves? Or is there more to it?
Right, because I can talk to my houseplants, but
Not quite the same thing.
not the same impact. So are we really talking about a two-way conversation here?
That's the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's not just us sending out signals into the void. It's engaging with a God who is actively listening and responding.
So less like leaving a voicemail and more like having an actual back and forth.
Exactly. And both Edwards and Chalk are really big on this idea that God's hearing has these two sides to it. Okay, I'm intrigued. Two sides. Lay it out for us.
So first there's the acceptance part. Like when you pray, God fully receives those prayers. He's not turning away. He's not hitting ignore.
And sometimes, isn't that enough?
Mm.
Just knowing that someone's really hearing you out, not brushing you off.
Absolutely. And that can bring such a sense of peace even before you see any outward answer.
100%. It's like confiding in a close friend,
Mm.
They may not have a solution, but just them listening,
Mm-hmm.
it's huge.
It's that same space of being heard and accepted by God that opens the door for the second part, his response. And his answer might not be immediate, might not look how we expect.
But it's going to be in line with his wisdom, his timing.
Exactly.
And both Edwards and Chalk get super specific about those responses.
Oh, yeah. They give some really compelling examples of how God shows up.
They do. Like, they really challenge our typical ideas of what that looks like.
Ready to dig into some of those?
Lead the way. What's first on the list?
First up, open access. Think of it this way. No VIP lines with God.
No velvet ropes.
None. He doesn't check your spiritual credentials at the door.
And you don't have to clean up your act before you approach him.
Nope. Both Edwards and Chalk are adamant about that. He welcomes everyone.
Which I think is super encouraging, because sometimes we can get caught up in feeling like,
like we're not good enough.
totally, or we've messed up too much.
But they both point to this beautiful truth that it's not about our perfection, it's about his invitation.
And that it's okay to be persistent in our prayers.
Oh yeah, they're big on that. It's not about having the perfect words, it's about coming boldly.
Like Jacob wrestling with God. Talk about a bold move.
Exactly. And the point is, God can handle our raw emotions, our doubts, even our anger. He leans into that realness.
And that kind of leads us to the second point.
Right.
God being ready to answer.
Yes. Now, to be clear, they're not saying it's always instant,
Yeah, good point.
but they're saying God's not dragging his feet.
He's not ignoring our prayers or putting them on hold.
Not at all.
Though sometimes the answer does come ridiculously fast.
It does.
Like, think about the prophet Daniel. He's still praying, hasn't even finished, and boom, an angel shows up with the answer.
Isn't that wild? It shows how God operates outside of time as we understand it. Like, he can work within our timelines, but he's not bound by them.
That's a mind bender right there.
Total mind bender. And then there's the nature of his answers, which is our third point.
Because it's not like we're just getting a participation trophy for praying.
No, not at all. Edwards and Chalk both talk about how God often goes above and beyond what we even ask for.
Like that story of Solomon. He could ask for anything, but he asked for wisdom to lead his people well.
Humble request.
So humble. And how does God respond?
Wisdom, yes, but also piles of riches and honor on top of it.
It's like ordering a pizza and getting a gourmet feast delivered.
Right. God's generosity operates on a whole other level.
Okay, so hold on to your hats, folks, because point number 4 is where things get really mind-blowing. We're talking supernatural intervention.
The really big stuff.
And Chalk does not hold back on the examples. Plagues in Egypt, a talking donkey, the sun stopping in its tracks.
It's like, is anything off limits with God?
Apparently not. But those stories, they remind us that his power is,
Limitless.
and that he's willing to use it in ways that...
Defy all logic and expectation.
Exactly. Like, if he can split the Red Sea to rescue his people.
Imagine what he can do in your life.
It's almost like he's saying, you think that was impressive? Hold my drink.
And that leads us to our fifth and maybe most humbling point. The idea that God, the God who created everything, allows himself to be moved by our prayers. Seriously, it kind of makes your brain bend a little to think that the God who spoke galaxies into existence
is actually moved by the prayers of, little old Luz.
Right. It's like, whoa. So how do Edwards and Chalk even wrap their heads around that?
Well, they're careful to say it's not that God's changing his mind because of what we say.
He's not like, oh, you want me to do what now?
Right. It's not like that. It's more like prayer itself is part of his plan all along.
So it's not us persuading him to do something he wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, think of it like, imagine a conductor leading an orchestra, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The conductor, he's written the music, he knows every note, every beat.
He's got the whole thing mapped out.
But when those musicians play their hearts out, that can move the conductor emotionally, even though the music stays the same.
I like that. So our prayers, they don't change God's ultimate plan.
But they still impact him. They move him in ways we might not fully grasp.
But then there's this whole other side of it. What about when it feels like our prayers aren't getting through?
The silence.
The silence. That can be really tough.
It can be. And honestly, it's something that both Edwards and Chalk acknowledge head on.
They don't shy away from it.
No. In fact, they give some really helpful insights into why that happens sometimes.
Because I think a lot of us have been there. You're pouring your heart out and it feels like crickets.
Exactly. So first thing they emphasize, checking our motives.
Motives. You mean like, why are we even praying in the first place?
Exactly. Are we coming to God humbly, seeking his will?
Or are we treating him like some kind of cosmic vending machine?
A little bit, yeah. We put in our prayer request and boom, we expect the answer to drop right out.
And when that doesn't happen?
We wonder why the machine's broken. But sometimes it's not about God saying no.
It's about him gently steering us in a different direction.
Exactly. Maybe a direction that's more in line with what he wants for us.
And that whole your will be done thing can be tough.
It can, but both Edwards and Chalk, they're adamant that real prayer isn't about getting God to do what we want.
It's about aligning ourselves with his plan.
Exactly. And that leads to their second point, sincerity. Because God's not just hearing our words,
Well,
right?
sees right through us.
All the way to the heart. He knows if we're just saying the right words or if we're really depending on him.
So no faking it with God.
No way. And even when our motives are good, we have to remember God's timing.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because we tend to want things on our timeline.
Instant gratification.
Exactly. But God, he's not on that same clock. What feels like forever to us.
Could be a split second to him.
Exactly.
But man, that takes a lot of trust to really embrace that.
It does. It means letting go of control, having faith that he's working things out even when we don't see it.
So sometimes the silence isn't God ignoring us.
Sometimes it's him preparing us for something even better.
Or protecting us from something we can't see.
Exactly. It's like that saying, if God seems distant, guess who moved?
Ooh, I like that. But it's so easy to get impatient, like, hello, God, are you there? It's me again.
It is. But both Edwards and Chalk warn about treating prayer like some kind of magic formula.
Like, if we just say the right words, God has to give us what we want.
Right, and it doesn't work that way. It's about relationship, not manipulation.
So it's not about dictating to God what we need.
It's about trusting that he knows better, that he's got this.
Even if what he has planned is different from what we had in mind.
Sometimes completely different. We come to him with our limited human perspective, thinking we know what's best.
But he sees the bigger picture. So what we think is a no could actually be his way of protecting us.
Or redirecting us. Or setting us up for something amazing down the road. Sometimes those detours, they lead to the most incredible destinations.
They do. And I think that's what both Edwards and Chalk are really getting at here. It's not just about getting what we want. It's about
drawing closer to God himself.
Yes. It's like we come to him with our wish lists, our carefully crafted prayers, and he's like, hold on, I want to give you something even better. I want to give you me.
It's like trading in a shallow exchange for a deep, meaningful relationship.
Exactly. So it's less about God, do this for me, and more like,
God, what do you want to do in me, through me?
And I think when we make that shift, our whole perspective on prayer changes. Suddenly it's not about bending God to our will.
It's about aligning our hearts with His.
And that's when we start praying for things that are so much bigger than ourselves.
Praying for His will to be done. Praying for other people.
And there's this beautiful paradox, isn't there? The more we surrender our own agenda in prayer,
The more purpose and fulfillment we find.
it's like we tap into something so much greater than ourselves.
We tap into His power, His purpose. Which brings us to that awesome verse from Ephesians. Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine.
Goosebumps every time.
Right. It reminds us that God's not limited by our finite understanding.
And that He's actually inviting us into something so much bigger, so much more incredible than we could ever dream up on our own.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you're left with a sense of awe. This God who hears us. He's not some distant deity. He wants to be involved in our lives.
He really does. And no matter where you're at on your own spiritual journey,
Don't be afraid to bring your doubts, your questions, your longings to Him.
because He's listening
Yeah.
and He cares.
And who knows what He might do in and through you when you invite Him into those conversations of your heart.
So good. So much to think about. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep seeking, keep going deeper in your faith.